I was walking through the park the other day, and I saw a toddler. I mean, he couldn't have been more than 3, chasing a duck.
Oh, yeah.
And the kid trips, just face plants right into the grass, and then looks up with these massive watery eyes.
Oh,
And my immediate, just visceral reaction was, I have to help. I need to protect that. It wasn't even a thought. It was a reflex.
it's biological. I
Right.
mean, we are hardwired to respond to that specific set of visual cues. The big head, the round eyes, the clumsy movement, it just screams harmless.
Right. It screams innocent. And that's what we're diving into today.
Mm-hmm.
Not, toddlers and ducks specifically, but that gut feeling, that instinct that tells us we know innocence when we see it. Because the research we have today suggests that my reflex in the park, it might be the root of a massive societal problem.
It's a bit of a Trojan horse, isn't it? Because we think we're looking at a moral quality innocence,
Yeah.
but we're actually just looking at biology.
At aesthetics. Yeah.
Exactly, at aesthetics. And the core argument from these readings is that we have completely collapsed the difference between looking innocent and being innocent.
Which sounds like just a debate over words until you realize that getting this wrong, well, it could destroy lives.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about how this confusion impacts the justice system, how we raise our kids, how we treat vulnerable adults, and even how we understand consent.
So let's start with the basics.
Yeah, because in my head, age and innocence have always been pretty much the same thing. Synonyms. You're young, you're innocent, you grow up, you lose it.
And that is the standard narrative for sure. But let's challenge that right away. The texts we're looking at, they make a really sharp, almost surgical distinction.
Okay.
They define age as purely chronological. It's just the odometer on the car. It measures time. That's it.
Right. How many years you been around?
But innocence isn't a measurement of time. It's a structural position. It's defined by capacity.
Capacity for what?
Specifically, the texts argue that innocence is the lack of harm knowledge, a lack of power, and the inability to understand or execute complex consequences.
Harm knowledge. That phrase really stuck out to me. It sounds heavy.
It is heavy because think about it. Once you know how the world can hurt you or how you can hurt the world, you can't unknow that.
Right.
That is the loss of innocence. It's not about your 18th birthday. It's about acquiring that heavy data.
So you could theoretically have a 30-year-old who, because of, say, really sheltered circumstances or cognitive differences, they just lack that harm knowledge.
Precisely. They are chronologically an adult, but ethically.
Ethically, they're in that state of innocence.
They occupy that space. They lack the capacity to manipulate complex outcomes. But conversely, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, you can have a child who's been exposed to profound trauma.
Yeah.
They are chronologically 10 years old, but they possess a deep, survival-based understanding of harm.
But, and here is the trap, we don't see the harm knowledge. We don't see the database in their head. We just see the face.
We see the aesthetic, and this is what the readings call the aesthetic trap. We prioritize the visual shortcut over the ethical reality.
So we look for softness.
We look for softness, we look for smooth skin, wide eyes, a gentle demeanor. If someone presents those traits, we hand them the innocent badge.
It's like we're casting a movie. You look the part, you must be the hero.
That's a perfect analogy, but think about the danger there. I mean, narcissists, con artists, sociopaths, so many of them are masters of mimicking those cues.
They can project that softness. They can do that wide-eye, who me look.
And so we lower our guard.
Yeah.
Because the visual cues match our internal bias.
And we raise our guard against the very people who might need our protection most, just because they don't look the part.
Exactly.
Before we get to the consequences, I want to dig into why we do this. I mean, why are we so obsessed with the look of innocence? The sources brought up this idea of nostalgia, which I found fascinating. It's not just about the kids. It's about us.
It's almost entirely about us. It's projection. The argument is that adults are, well, we're exhausted. The world is complex. It's morally gray. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
So we look at youth and we project a fantasy of simplicity onto them. We want to believe there is a state of being where everything is safe and soft.
So we're basically treating children as these blank canvases for our own desire for safety.
We need them to be pure so we can feel a little better about the world.
Yeah.
We demand that they perform this aesthetic of cuteness or gentleness because it soothes our own anxiety.
That feels incredibly selfish when you put it like that.
It is. It turns innocence into a commodity we consume rather than a condition we protect.
Wow.
And then when the child refuses to play along, when they are loud or dirty or angry or just difficult, We get offended.
because they've broken the fantasy.
They shattered it.
Which brings us right into the so what of this whole deep dive. Because if we are judging innocence by a vibe check, people are getting hurt. The outline mentions harm moving in two directions. Let's talk about the first one, the children who don't fit the mold.
Right. This is often called adultification bias, though the sources focus more broadly on just the aesthetic mismatch.
Okay.
So imagine a child who is physically large for their age. Or maybe a child who has learned to be tough because they come from an unsafe environment.
The kid who stands with their arms crossed, doesn't smile with the teacher, maybe has a bit of a scowl.
Right. They don't signal softness. They signal threat or defiance. So what does society do?
We assume they know what they're doing?
We assume that because they don't look innocent, they must possess adult-level agency, and we punish them accordingly.
You see this in schools all the time. The cute kid acts out, and it's, oh, they're just spirited.
Of course.
But the tough-looking kid does the exact same thing, and it's, they're a problem. They're dangerous.
We strip the protection of innocence away from that child simply because they failed the aesthetic test.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
We are essentially saying you are too ugly or too scary to be treated as a child.
Or you are too black, or you are too poor. I mean, let's be honest, those aesthetic biases often overlap heavily with race and class.
Right.
We attribute capacity, the ability to handle adult consequences to children who possess zero actual power just because they don't trigger our, oh, how cute reflex.
And then there's the flip side. Scenario B, the adults.
Right. If we hoard innocence and softness just for the young, we end up denying adults the right to be vulnerable.
It creates this binary where once you hit a certain age, you have to be hard.
You have to be armored.
All the time.
Which is incredibly isolating. It implies that if you're an adult, you can't be a victim in the same way. You should have known better.
You should have protected yourself.
Exactly. We struggle to extend empathy to adults who are exploited because our first thought is, well, you don't look helpless.
Okay, I want to pivot to what I think is the most difficult part of this research, but also maybe the most important.
I know where you're going.
The sexualization of vulnerability. The text makes this really disturbing connection between how we see innocence and desire.
Yeah, this is the dark heart of the aesthetic trap. When you define innocence as a look, softness, openness, smoothness, you turn it into an object of beauty.
And human beings want to possess beautiful things.
It's deeper than that even. It's about power. If innocence is framed as aesthetic purity, then taking it or corrupting it becomes a demonstration of power.
The forbidden fruit idea.
It's that, but even without the corruption angle, just the cuteness itself can trigger a desire to consume.
Consume is a really creepy word there.
But I think it's accurate. I mean, think about how we even talk about babies. Oh, I could just eat you up. It's affection, yes, but it's rooted in that idea of consumption.
Okay.
Now apply that to the sexual realm. When vulnerability is stylized as sexy, the breathless voice, the wide-eyed confusion, we are eroticizing a lack of power.
Wow. Okay. So we are, in a way, training ourselves to find powerlessness attractive.
Which is fundamentally dangerous, because if you find powerlessness attractive, you are less likely to intervene to stop it. You might even subconsciously want to maintain it.
This is where the ethical definition has to come in and save us. Because if we stop looking at innocence as pretty and start looking at it as lacking capacity, the whole equation changes.
Completely. This is the pivot point. If I see a person who lacks power, lacks understanding, and lacks the ability to consent, and I view that through an ethical lens, my response isn't desire.
No.
It's not how beautiful. My response is duty.
It's protection.
It's safeguarding. When you strip away the aesthetic, innocence is just extreme vulnerability. It's a person standing on a cliff edge blindfolded. You don't admire the blindfold, you grab their arm.
That distinction between admiring a blindfold and grabbing the arm, that's everything. That's the whole ballgame.
It forces a shift from being a spectator to being a guardian. The text argues that innocence isn't something to be cherished or put on a pedestal. It's a structural deficit that demands a safety net.
So practically speaking, how do we apply this? I mean, we can't just interview every person we meet to determine their harm knowledge database.
Yeah.
We still have to function.
No, we don't want to infantilize everyone. The goal isn't to treat 40-year-olds like toddlers. The source suggests we use age as a proxy, a betting line, but we have to remain open to what it calls contextual innocence.
I love that term, contextual innocence,
Yeah.
because it acknowledges that I can be powerful in one room and totally powerless in another.
Exactly. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a high-powered CEO, In the boardroom, she is not innocent. She has power, agency, full harm knowledge of her industry.
She's a shark.
Total shark. Now, put that same woman in an emergency room. She's just had a massive allergic reaction. She's going into anaphylactic shock.
Oh.
She can't speak. She doesn't understand the medical jargon being shouted around her. She has zero control over what drugs are being put into her veins. In that room, in that context, is she innocent?
By the ethical definition,
Yes.
she lacks power. She lacks informed consent. She is vulnerable.
She is structurally innocent. And the doctors and nurses owe her the same duty of care and safeguarding they would owe a child.
It doesn't matter that she's a tough CEO on the outside.
Not at all. The context stripped her of capacity.
That makes it so much clearer. It's not a badge you wear. It's a state of being relative to the situation.
And that's why the visual shortcut fails us so badly. If the doctor looks at her and says, well, she looks like a tough, wealthy woman, she can handle it, he might neglect the care she needs.
You might assume she understands the risks when she doesn't.
Yes. So it really requires us to constantly assess power dynamics. Who holds the cards here, rather than who looks like a victim?
And that is exhausting work. That's why we don't do it. It's so much easier to just look for the innocent vibes.
It is. But the sources are arguing that we have a moral imperative to do the work, to look past the face and see the power structure.
You know, it reminds me of, well, this is a bit dark, but how we treat the elderly.
Go on.
Well, often we revert to that infantilizing thing. We call them cute. We talk to them like babies.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're losing physical power, we project that childlike innocence onto them again. But they have a lifetime of harm knowledge. They aren't innocent in their minds. They're just physically vulnerable.
That's a perfect example of the mismatch. We confuse physical frailty with moral simplicity, so we stop listening to them. We stop treating them as people with histories and start treating them as, well, as pets.
We're back to the aesthetic trap.
All right, back there.
So if we strip all this away, if we stop using the look of innocence as our guide, what are we left with? What does a society look like that actually gets this right?
It looks much more responsible, and probably a lot less romantic.
Now.
Well, if we accept that innocence is just a lack of power, then we stop fetishizing it. We stop trying to return to innocence. We realize the goal of life should be to gain capacity, to gain understanding, but to do so without becoming predatory.
And for those who don't have the power, the kids, the sick, the vulnerable, we stop worrying about whether they're good or cute or deserving.
And we just protect them because of the power imbalance.
Exactly.
It takes the judgment out of it. You don't have to be a sweet child to deserve protection from abuse. You just have to be a child.
You don't have to be a noble victim to deserve justice.
You just have to be a victim. That's it.
That's a relief, honestly. It takes the pressure off the victim to perform goodness.
It does. And it puts the pressure squarely on the rest of us, the ones with the power to behave ethically. The source explicitly says, innocence disappears when responsibility emerges.
That's the boundary line.
That's the line. If you have the capacity to understand the consequences, you are no longer innocent. You are responsible. And in a way, that's empowering. It's the price of admission for adulthood.
It brings me back to that reflex I had in the park. The toddler falling. I wanted to help because he looked cute. But the challenge is to cultivate that same reflex, that same, I need to protect this, when I see someone who doesn't look cute.
Right.
When I see the teenager scowling because he's scared.
Yeah.
Or the adult who is confused and overwhelmed.
That is the evolved instinct. Moving from helping the cute thing to safeguarding the vulnerable thing, it's harder. It goes against our wiring. But it's the only way to build a society that is actually safe rather than one that just looks nice.
I want to leave everyone with a thought that's been rattling around my head since we started reading these texts. We spend so much time mourning the loss of innocence. We act like it's this great tragedy when we grow up and learn how hard the world is.
It's the universal story, right? Peter Pan, Garden of Eden.
But if innocence is truly just a lack of agency, a lack of ability to control your own life, maybe we shouldn't be mourning its loss. Maybe we should be celebrating the capacity to protect.
I think that's right.
So the question I have for you listening is this. If you stopped looking for innocence in people's faces, if you stopped trying to spot who is good and started looking for who is powerless, how would your day change? Who would you notice that you normally ignore? And who might you stop trusting just because they have a nice smile?
It changes the whole room.
It really does. Thanks for taking this dive with us. It wasn't the lightest topic, but I think I'm going to be seeing the world a little differently tomorrow.
Same here. Take care of yourselves.
See you next time.